So, everyday artworks. Do I like them? Do I think they're a good idea? Do I think you should do them? I've heard quite a lot of opinions about everyday artworks over the years. My general opinion is I like them. I think they're good. I think there are many benefits to starting many projects and not necessarily reaching completion with them. I think there are different skill sets involved. I think you tend to learn more when you start more things at a faster pace and you fail quickly. Learning from failure is always the fastest way to learn, no matter what skill you are developing or taking part in. Now, with everyday artworks, it's not necessarily about failing. It's just about starting, getting as far as you can in the fastest amount of time, and then producing a result from it. And that also teaches you when to learn the cutoff point. I think that's like perfectionism. The main complaint I hear about when people talk about not being able to finish projects is not knowing where that cutoff point should be. I think you tend to learn that pretty quickly when you're doing like these everyday quick burst types of projects. I think another skill it teaches you is how to recycle your work effectively. And maybe that leads to repetition sometimes, like in a lot of these everyday artworks, you'll see a lot of the same kind of patterns happening as a kind of like necessity for saving time. But maybe that's the difficulty, maybe that's the skill, trying to learn not to be repetitive when recycling your work. And I think if people can master that, they'll become super effective artists, like really good at prototyping new styles and new visuals at a rapid pace. I'm inspired to do this discussion video recently because I've been enjoying the work of Stupid Giant, and I'll show you that on the screen. Because I only kind of learned about them somewhat recently, like a few months ago or something, and I did record this discussion video in the car back then, but I deleted it because I didn't really like how, well, sometimes like I watch my own discussion videos and I'm like, oh, just get to the point already, Jesus. So like not all of them make it through, but yeah, everyday artworks I think are really interesting, and this kind of leads us on to like a new discussion point about the industry and the market and the digital space, which is, do you actually need to finish projects? I'm going to give a controversial opinion here that if you're trying to be an artist in the modern age, maybe finishing projects is actually a detriment to you. That's going to be maybe a controversial take. Obviously, like if you're going into a workplace and stuff, you need to learn how to finish projects, you know, like knowing how to round off your work and, you know, meet a deliverable, that's the term, and do things to a high quality professional degree. Yes, that will separate the wheat from the chaff. But if you're not going in for one of those traditional jobs and you're just trying to grow your presence online, considering that most of the time during an art project is usually in the later stages, as you're making little tweaks, the things that aren't like the major significant direction changing decisions that usually happen at the beginning, that you might consider as wasted time, especially when you can be trimming off a lot of that and then moving on to the next thing. In this kind of digital content focused era, stuff is consumed very quickly. When people look at artwork, they're not studying the process of how you did it. They give it a quick glance and they double tap to like and move on. Or if it's something like YouTube, they'll stick around if it's entertaining. If you can keep their attention around, they'll watch like your process and then they'll move on to the next thing. You know, there's a fair amount of optimization, and I think depending on the type of work you're going in for, the type of artwork you want to make, the format that it's going to be presented to people, you don't necessarily need to worry that much about finishing things off. If you spend hours and hours and hours and hours and hours on something that realistically people aren't going to spend too much attention on, then you're wasting time that you could be spending moving on to the next thing and helping yourself grow, maximizing that growth. Now, obviously, people might not want to maximize their growth. Everyone's going to make a decision for themselves on how they want to do this. But yeah, realistically, if you're like trying to make a life and a social presence, you could probably maximize your following count, your view counts, and your income by not finishing projects. I'm seeing a lot of people nowadays, like in the social space on Twitter, Patreons, etc., making an entire life out of experiments. Just making experiments and sharing those results and those techniques with their followers and their communities. Being an experimentalist is a job now, and I guess I'm kind of one of those, I suppose. An experimentalist. You discover new techniques, you show them to your followers, you maybe make tools out of them in my case, and you just move on. Now again, as I always say with like all of these discussion videos, it depends, and there are caveats for absolutely everything. Rule number one, all things within reason. But I do sit here and I watch a lot of these creators and I think, well, the ones, as we said, starting fast and failing quickly have a leg up in this modern age. Like I really believe that. And the harsh truth about a lot of like, personal projects is you can watch someone spend years working on a project. And the really sad part about it is that, they'll invest so much time and ambition into this and they'll finally release it. And, back in the day, I think older generations were probably taught that if something has quality, it will attract people. It will attract viewers. It will attract customers. It'll be an easy thing to market if its quality stands on its own. But the thing is, there's just so much more of everything nowadays. And that it doesn't matter if you spend like 3 years working on a book or a film or a game or something. If you don't have an audience, no one will see it. There are caveats to that, and I like to think about those caveats as multiplier values. So for example, if you spent years working on a video game, for example, and you release it, if it's a good video game, when a trickle of viewers do eventually stumble on it, the greatness of what you've made is a multiplier value for how much they're going to care about it. So if it's fantastic, the few people you get are going to care more about it, so your chances of them sharing it with other people will increase as well. But generally, on the whole, if you don't have a pre-existing audience, it's going to be remarkably hard to get it put in front of new people. This is a really sad thing about the modern age because it means that ambition does not translate to success. So you need to be smart about marketing, you need to be smart about growing an audience while you're producing something. So why does this give, like everyday artists a leg up in the modern age? Well, I feel like everyday artists are already kind of exploring that social growth aspect. So in a hypothetical future where if they wanted to work on longer term projects, they've already got a maximum advantage for getting it put in front of people. It's the same thing we do on YouTube. I like to think about this as the give and take principle, where if you want to be selfish and have your personal projects succeed and be shown to many people, say for example, if I was to stop and write a book one day or make another video game, or maybe one day make a film, having that be successful is a very selfish endeavor. It's something that I want. It's egotistical. It's, for income reasons as well. But to be given that, I feel like we have to give back to the community largely, and that's one really good way of raising your audience. You must give before you could take. So what do I mean by that? Like, what would be an example of giving? Well, like creating tutorials is my method of giving. Also creating free resources is my method of giving. We are supplying a demand. There's an interest for those things. They help people. We go out of our way to do that, not necessarily for monetary gain. Also, potentially, we could use the term social good there. We give, and that contributes to a community culture. I do feel like possibly everyday artworks also kind of fill a demand there as well when people are kind of flicking through their Instagrams and TikToks and YouTubes looking for quick short form content. It supplies a demand. Supplying that demand largely over time, you will get a drip, just a small drip of people that express interest beyond the content that's made, and then they search around. It's the filtration, I suppose, where if you consider the 100% of the people that see your work, 10% of them may be interested in other types of work you do, and then 10% of those would be interested in kind of you as a person, and it filters down and down and down. Essentially, that filtered, that distilled interest is your currency for taking, pretty much. Basically, do a lot for other people, and you will get a very small amount of this currency that when you do finally do a project for yourself, something you want to be known for, something you want to raise income, that currency is what's going to make that succeed. So I guess that's my advice, and that's why I do think something like everyday artworks are a good idea, or not maximizing and finishing long-term projects if you want to succeed online or raise a large audience. Supply a large demand, go out of your way to do that, raise an audience, market yourself, market your ideas, market your projects in a way that benefits other people first and foremost. In doing so, you will get a small distilled currency of interest from people, and that over time, that small amount that builds up, that is going to be your payoff when you eventually, invest time in making something larger in the future. Those people, that relatively small grouping of people compared to the larger masses that you've contributed to. They say somewhere that to succeed, you only need 1,000 true fans. I think that might be the saying. I think obviously, caveats, rule number one, etc. But I do think there's a lot of truth in that. As we're making content, I see a lot of the same people appearing in the comments and writing, the same kind of encouraging stuff. And that's always lovely. And there's always going to be a certain number of people that are the first ones to purchase a new product. So I do feel like there's truth there, and it's something to strive for. That tiny currency we're talking about, those are the true fans, your 1,000 fans. You can make content for millions of people, be seen by millions, but over time, that drip of true fans is growing. And I feel like it doesn't matter whether you're building the largest project you've ever built in your life, so long as you keep contributing back to a community, you keep supplying a demand, you keep giving before you're taking, that currency will increase. So that's something I like to think about. And I don't think it's, I know that people look at everyday artworks, for example, everyday artists, and think, they're not true artists. Why do they have this much attention? I spent ages on this artwork and I'm not getting as much attention as they are. And it's well, because it misses the point. I think being a digital artist nowadays, there are so many routes to go about it. A lot of people do it for just the enjoyment of it, which is perfectly great and fine. I think that's what it should always be built on top of. Some people do it for getting jobs, that's fine. And other people do it because they're productive cultivators of community and they want to build a following. And I do not believe that everyone wants to build a following just for egotistical reasons. I think there's always a little bit of that. Like, we shouldn't be disingenuous. There's always going to be a little bit of egotism somewhere, just by the nature of identifying yourself as an individual online and having like a following number attached to it. But like in my case, I'm obsessed with creation and resourcefulness and building, and I have a very low attention span. I don't like things to be the same. I always want to build more and more and more for the future. And there's life satisfaction in productivity that I don't know how to describe. Like, I mean, I've talked about this before. Like, when I play video games, I look for video games which have like bounties, easy to complete tasks, things which make you feel productive as you're playing, which is quite a dangerous combination because you can feel like you're achieving something even though you're wasting time in quotes. I don't know if playing video games should be considered wasting time because it's also a source of inspiration, but I consider that like doing everyday artworks would also hit the same kind of nerve. That same kind of maybe dopamine hit, is it? Where if you're not spending too long on making something and you're continuously posting stuff out and you're getting this feedback back from it in the form of likes and followers, you are hitting that productivity high. And I know from speaking to some other artists, that's like something very, very strong. That productivity high that's given from the like count that comes through Twitter. You know, we can insert all kinds of mental health discussions here about whether that's a good or a bad thing, but I think in a certain way it really does contribute to life satisfaction. And you know, one thing I have found is that when starting from scratch, even like this channel, for example, even like when there was like hardly any following or interest for anything that's being posted, there's something fun about it. If you enjoy the work and you enjoy the creation, the building process, the novelty of like raising interest, there's something very, very fun about it. And I feel like everyday artists kind of like are tapping into that. So yeah, that's just my thoughts about it. We've gone in like quite a wide direction there, branching off and touching many different subjects. And I'm sure that this might be one of the more pretentiously philosophical videos about the subject, but I think it's really interesting. And I like to be inspired by, you know, this kind of daily feed of content. So yes, hopefully you found that interesting. And if you have any ideas on the subject, then of course, feel free to leave them down in the comments. I love reading your comments. I love reading your ideas. I never consider these videos as like debates or trying to impose controversial opinions. I really hate all of that. With these kinds of discussions, I just wanted to feel like you're kind of like stretching your muscles, but more like your kind of like mind muscles and just thinking about things in kind of more open ways. So thanks for watching, everyone. Oh yeah, the emoji. If you made it to the end, looking at Stupid Giant, he's got a lot of pig stuff recently. So is there a pig emoji? There are a few pig emojis. I've just had a look. So pick one, put it in the comments. Have a fantastic day, and I will see you next time.